What would you do if the person sworn to protect and serve became the very threat to your family? In a world where justice is supposed to be blind, a racist cop takes things too far, punching a pregnant black woman in broad daylight. But what he doesn't know is that her husband is a man who will stop at nothing to protect his own. What follows is a heart-pounding battle for survival, filled with betrayal, gunfights, and a shocking revenge that will leave you speechless. But here's the question: if someone hurt the person you love the most, how far would you go for justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more powerful stories. Now, let's get into it. The Texas sun blazed over the small town of Fairview, casting long shadows on Main Street. It was a quiet place, the kind where everyone knew each other's business. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, especially between the local black community and the town's predominantly white police force. Aisha Carter, 7 months pregnant, walked out of the grocery store, her belly round with life. Her husband, Malcolm, a former Marine turned security contractor, had parked just across the lot. He waved at her, a warm smile on his face. Aisha adjusted the bags in her arms and started towards him. Then, the trouble began. "Hey! You!" A voice barked. Aisha turned to see Officer Hank Rollins. A burly, red-faced cop with a reputation for harassing black residents. His hand hovered near his holster as he stalked toward her. "What do you want, officer?" Aisha asked, keeping her tone even. Rollins smirked. "You fit the description of a shoplifter we're looking for." Aisha's eyes narrowed. "I paid for my groceries. You can check with the cashier." Malcolm had already started walking toward them, his instincts kicking in. He knew Rollins. He'd had run-ins with the racist cop before, but never this close to home. "I ain't gotta check nothin'," Rollins sneered. "Turn around and put your hands where I can see 'em." Aisha's heart pounded. "Officer, Rollins grabbed her wrist hard. "Hey! Get your damn hands off my wife!" Malcolm shouted, breaking into a run. Rollins turned his head, but before he could react, Aisha instinctively yanked her arm back. That tiny act of defiance set him off. With shocking speed, he reared back and punched her in the stomach. The force of the blow sent Aisha crumpling to the pavement, gasping for air. Malcolm saw red. He sprinted the last few steps, slamming into Rollins like a freight train. The two men hit the ground, fists flying. Malcolm's military training took over, his strikes precise and devastating. Rollins managed to scramble for his radio. "Code 3. Officer under attack." Malcolm snatched the radio from his hand and smashed it on the asphalt. "You just hit my pregnant wife, you son of a..." The wail of sirens cut through the air. Backup was coming. Malcolm knew what that meant. More cops. More guns. More danger. Aisha groaned in pain, holding her stomach. Malcolm had no choice. He scooped her up in his arms and bolted for the truck. "Stop right there." 2 squad cars screeched to a halt, doors flying open. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn. Malcolm hesitated. If he stayed, they'd kill him or lock him up. If he ran, they'd chase him, but Aisha needed help. Get on the ground now. His mind raced. Then, he made his decision. He dove into the truck, slammed the door, and floored it. Gunshots rang out, bullets shattered the rear windshield. But Malcolm didn't stop. He had only one goal: get Aisha to safety. As he sped out of town, tires screeching, the roar of sirens followed close behind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The engine roared as Malcolm tore down the highway, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled fury. The rearview mirror reflected the flashing red and blue lights gaining on him. His heart pounded, his mind a whirlwind of rage and desperation. Aisha groaned beside him, clutching her stomach. "Baby, hold on. We're almost there," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. A bullet had torn through the back window, and another had punctured the headrest behind him. Too close. He swerved onto a back road, kicking up a cloud of dust. "Malcolm," Aisha gasped, her breath shaky. "The baby." He risked a glance at her. Sweat beaded her forehead. "Stay with me," he pleaded. The sirens faded slightly. But he knew they weren't giving up. Not after what had happened. He reached for his phone, hitting speed dial. The call connected. "Malcolm?" A deep voice answered. "Briggs. I need help." There was a pause. Then, "Where are you?" Eastbound, just off Route 12. Cops are after me. Aisha's hurt. Another pause. How bad? She needs a hospital. But they'll kill me before we get there. I'm on my way. The call ended. Briggs was an old friend from the Marines, someone who didn't ask questions, just took action. Malcolm prayed he was close enough. The road ahead stretched into darkness. He pushed the gas pedal to the floor, but the flashing lights reappeared behind him, 2 police cruisers. The radio in one of the cars crackled to life. Malcolm Carter, pull over now. There is no escape. Like hell, a sharp bend loomed ahead. He yanked the wheel hard. A sharp bend loomed ahead. Malcolm yanked the wheel hard, sending the truck skidding onto a gravel side road. The tires fought for traction, kicking up a thick cloud of dust behind them. The police cruisers followed, their sirens wailing like hunting wolves. Aisha let out a soft cry, her hand pressing against her belly. Just hold on, baby, Malcolm said, his voice tight. I got you. Gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets whizzed past, striking the truck's tailgate. A side mirror exploded in a shower of glass. Malcolm clenched his jaw. They weren't trying to arrest him anymore. They were trying to kill him. His military instincts kicked in. He spotted a narrow path through the trees to his right. Without hesitation, he cranked the wheel and cut through the dense underbrush, branches scraping against the truck's frame. The police cars skidded to a stop at the road's edge, their headlights sweeping the trees. Dispatch, suspect has gone off-road. One of the officers shouted into his radio. We need aerial support. Malcolm knew time was running out. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for Aisha and their unborn child. The truck bounced violently over uneven terrain. He could hear Aisha's pained breathing. Baby, just a little longer, he promised. Then, ahead in the clearing, a pair of headlights flicked on. Briggs, a massive black SUV idled just beyond the trees. The driver's door swung open, and a figure emerged, silhouetted by the high beams. Ex-Marine. Ex-mercenary. A man who had seen war and had no fear of bringing it home. Briggs raised a shotgun and leveled it at the pursuing officers. The first cop car burst through the brush, headlights flashing. Boom, the blast ripped through the night. The windshield of the police cruiser exploded. The driver swerved, losing control. The car careened into a tree with a sickening crunch. The second cruiser braked hard. Briggs didn't hesitate. He racked another shell and fired again. Boom, the front tire of the second police car blew out. The vehicle jerked sideways, skidding to a halt. Malcolm didn't stop to watch. He barreled through the clearing, stopping beside Briggs. The former Marine yanked open Aisha's door. She okay? He asked, scanning her with a practiced eye. She needs a hospital, Malcolm said. Briggs nodded. I know a place. More sirens howled in the distance. Briggs jerked his head toward his SUV. Switch cars. Now. Malcolm didn't argue. He scooped Aisha into his arms and carried her to the waiting vehicle. Briggs hopped into the driver's seat, and the SUV peeled away just as more police vehicles stormed onto the scene. Malcolm glanced back as flames licked at the wrecked cruiser. This was war now, and he wasn't about to lose. The SUV roared down the dark highway, its powerful engine drowning out the distant wail of sirens. Malcolm sat in the back seat, cradling Aisha as she breathed heavily, her face contorted with pain. Briggs gripped the wheel, eyes scanning the road ahead. We can't go to a regular hospital, Briggs said. Cops will be waiting. Malcolm clenched his fists. Aisha needs a doctor. Now. Briggs shot him a look through the rearview mirror. I know a guy. Former military medic. He operates off-grid. Aisha groaned softly. Hang in there, baby, Malcolm whispered. I got you. Briggs took a sharp turn onto a dirt road, disappearing into the dense forest. The SUV's tires crunched over gravel as they approached an old hunting lodge. Hidden deep in the woods. A single light flickered in the window. As soon as they stopped, the front door swung open, and a tall man stepped out. Doc Reynolds, a former field surgeon. Reynolds had treated more bullet wounds in war zones than most ER doctors saw in a lifetime. Briggs jumped out first. She's hurt, document. We need you. Reynolds didn't ask questions. Bring her inside. Malcolm carried Aisha into the dimly lit lodge, placing her carefully on a worn-out cot. Reynolds knelt beside her, hands moving quickly, checking her pulse, her breathing, her belly. "She's in distress," Reynolds muttered. "Baby's heartbeat is strong, but she took a serious hit." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Can you help her?" Reynolds nodded. "I'll do what I can." Briggs stood by the window, peeking through the blinds. "We don't have much time." Malcolm turned to him. "They're still after us?" Briggs nodded. "You punched a cop and ran. They won't let that slide." Malcolm clenched his fists. "He hit my pregnant wife." Briggs's eyes darkened. "Yeah. And now they'll come for blood." Reynolds looked up. "You both need to be ready. If they find this place." Boom, a gunshot echoed in the night. Briggs swore under his breath. "They're here." Malcolm grabbed a rifle from Briggs's duffel bag and moved to the window. Headlights appeared through the trees, 2, maybe 3 vehicles. "They brought backup," Briggs muttered. Reynolds grabbed his med kit. "I'll take care of Aisha. You two do what you do best." Malcolm chambered around. His eyes burned with cold fury. "They started this," he said. "Let's finish it." The first squad car screeched to a stop. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn. Briggs smirked. "Showtime." Malcolm took aim. The fight was about to begin. The night was thick with tension. Malcolm crouched by the window, his finger resting on the trigger of his rifle. Briggs stood beside him, loading shells into a shotgun with practiced ease. Outside, the cops fanned out, their flashlights sweeping the lodge's perimeter. "Malcolm Carter." A voice bellowed through a megaphone. "You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Malcolm's grip tightened. "They think we're just gonna surrender?" Briggs muttered. "They don't know who they're dealing with." Malcolm peered through his scope. 5 officers. Maybe more hiding in the woods. He spotted Rollins, the same racist cop who had punched Aisha, standing by one of the cruisers with his gun drawn. The rage inside Malcolm burned hotter. "You got a plan?" Briggs asked. "Yeah," Malcolm said. "We take them out fast." Briggs grinned. "That's what I like to hear." A flashlight beam swept across the front door. An officer stepped forward, cautiously approaching the lodge. Malcolm took a slow breath, lined up his shot. Crack, the rifle kicked against his shoulder as the bullet found its mark. The officer dropped instantly, his weapon clattering on the ground. Shots fired. Shots fired. Another cop screamed. Briggs kicked the front door open, stepping out with his shotgun raised. Boom, a deafening blast sent a second cop flying backward. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the night as bullets sprayed toward the lodge. Malcolm ducked back, then rolled to another window, popping up to take another shot. Crack, a third officer went down. Briggs laughed. They weren't ready for this. From the back room, Aisha moaned. Malcolm's heart clenched. He couldn't lose focus. She needed him. Outside, Rollins barked orders. "Hold your fire. We need reinforcements." Malcolm spotted him crouching behind a police car, shouting into his radio. Briggs noticed too. "You want him?" Malcolm nodded. "Oh yeah." He steadied his aim, but before he could fire, another voice called out, "This is the FBI. Lower your weapons now." Malcolm's stomach twisted. Black SUVs screeched onto the scene. Agents poured out. Their rifles trained on both the cops and the lodge. "What the hell?" Briggs muttered. Then Malcolm saw her, a tall black woman in a dark suit, stepping forward like she owned the battlefield. Special Agent Naomi Hayes, and judging by her expression, she wasn't here to save the cops, she was here for Malcolm. The battlefield fell into a tense silence as Special Agent Naomi Hayes stepped forward, her sharp gaze scanning the scene. The FBI agents surrounding her stood with rifles ready, but they weren't aiming at Malcolm and Briggs, they were aiming at the local cops. "Drop your weapons," Hayes commanded, her voice cutting through the night like a blade. Rollins' face twisted in fury. "This is our jurisdiction. Stay the hell out of this." Hayes didn't blink. "Federal law trumps local. You fired on an unarmed pregnant woman and her husband. That makes you criminals." Malcolm stayed behind cover, his rifle still aimed at Rollins. Briggs muttered, "I like her." Rollins' hand twitched toward his gun. But Hayes' agents were faster. The telltale clicks of safeties flipping off filled the air. "You even think about pulling that trigger, and I'll drop you where you stand," Hayes said coldly. Rollins' jaw clenched. He looked at the other officers. The ones who weren't wounded hesitated, unsure whether to obey or resist. Malcolm knew what was happening. Some of these cops were loyal to Rollins, but others? They weren't willing to die for him. "Put him down," one officer finally muttered, tossing his gun to the ground. Another followed. Then another. Rollins was alone, his face turned red with rage. "You're all cowards." He spat. He looked at Malcolm, eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over." Hayes took a step closer. "Oh, it is." In one swift motion, she pulled out a pair of handcuffs and snapped them onto Rollins' wrists. He struggled, but 2 FBI agents forced him down. Malcolm let out a slow breath. It should have felt like a victory. But something still felt off. Then, Aisha screamed from inside the lodge. Malcolm bolted, running to her side. She lay on the cot, sweat covering her forehead. Reynolds worked frantically, pressing a stethoscope to her belly. "What's happening?" Malcolm demanded. "She's going into labor," Reynolds said. His voice was calm, but his hands moved fast. Malcolm's heart slammed against his ribs. "It's too early." Reynolds looked at him. "We don't have a choice. The baby's coming now." Outside, the standoff was over. But inside, Malcolm faced a new battle, one he wasn't sure how to fight, because now, it wasn't about guns or revenge, it was about life. Aisha's scream tore through the lodge, raw and full of agony. Malcolm knelt beside her, gripping her hand as she gasped for breath. Sweat drenched her forehead, her body trembling with the force of the contractions. "She's in full labor," Reynolds said, rolling up his sleeves. "We need to deliver this baby now." Malcolm's pulse pounded. "She's not due for another 2 months." Reynolds shot him a hard look. "Tell that to the baby." Outside, the distant hum of helicopters filled the air. More law enforcement was on the way, but Malcolm didn't care. The only thing that mattered was Aisha and their child. Hayes stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. "We have to move, Malcolm. More state police are inbound." Malcolm shook his head. "We're not going anywhere until my baby is safe." Hayes hesitated, then nodded. "I'll buy you time." She turned to Briggs. "Help me secure the perimeter." Briggs grinned. "I thought you'd never ask." They rushed out, leaving Malcolm with Aisha and Reynolds. She let out another cry, squeezing Malcolm's hand so hard it felt like she'd crush his bones. "Okay, Aisha," Reynolds said, positioning himself. "You need to push." Tears streamed down her face as she fought through the pain. Malcolm stroked her hair, whispering, "You got this, baby. I'm right here." The tension in the room was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. Aisha screamed again, her body arching as she pushed with everything she had. Reynolds' eyes widened. "I see the head. Almost there." Outside, the crack of gunfire erupted. Malcolm's head snapped toward the door. Briggs' voice roared through the chaos. "We got company." Hayes' radio crackled. "Multiple state troopers, 6, maybe more. Engaging now." Malcolm's blood ran cold. They were still under attack. "Focus on Aisha," Reynolds barked. "She needs you." Malcolm turned back. His wife's face twisted with pain, but her eyes locked onto his. Another push, another gunshot outside, another scream, then, a piercing, newborn cry filled the air. Reynolds let out a relieved breath, carefully lifting the tiny, wriggling baby into his hands. "It's a girl." Malcolm felt his heart crack wide open. Aisha sobbed with exhaustion and relief as Reynolds placed their daughter against her chest. "She's perfect," Aisha whispered. Malcolm touched the baby's tiny fingers. "Yeah. She is." But the moment of peace didn't last. Boom, an explosion rocked the lodge. Briggs' voice rang out. "They're bringing in heavy fire." Malcolm's jaw clenched. He kissed Aisha's forehead and stood. The war wasn't over, not yet, and now, he had even more to fight for. The explosion sent a tremor through the lodge, rattling the walls and shaking dust from the ceiling. Malcolm's instincts kicked in. He grabbed his rifle, adrenaline surging through his veins. Aisha clutched their newborn daughter, her eyes filled with fear. Malcolm, don't, he kissed her forehead. I have to. I won't let them take this from us. Reynolds nodded. Go. I'll protect them. Malcolm turned and rushed outside, rifle raised. The scene was chaos. Fire flickered from a burning police vehicle. Briggs crouched behind a stack of logs, reloading his shotgun. Hayes and her FBI team took cover behind SUVs, exchanging fire with the advancing state troopers. Briggs shouted. They brought an armored truck. Sure enough, a hulking black SWAT vehicle rumbled forward, its turret-mounted gun locking onto the lodge. Malcolm gritted his teeth. If that thing opened fire, Aisha and their baby were done for. We need to take that truck out. Hayes yelled, firing at a trooper who tried to flank her. Briggs grinned. I got an idea. He pointed to a fuel barrel near the burning police car. One good shot, and boom. Malcolm understood instantly. He dropped to a knee, steadied his rifle, and took aim. The SWAT turret rotated toward them. Now or never, brother. Briggs shouted. Crack. Malcolm's bullet punched into the barrel. For half a second, nothing happened. Then, kaboom, the explosion ripped through the night. The shockwave sent officers sprawling. The armored truck lifted slightly before crashing back down, flames licking its sides. Briggs let out a wild laugh. Hell yeah. But the fight wasn't over. Rollins had escaped FBI custody during the chaos, and he was gunning for Malcolm. A sudden gunshot cracked through the night. A bullet whizzed past Malcolm's ear, barely missing him. He spun just in time to see Rollins emerging from the smoke, pistol raised, his face twisted with rage. You think you won? Rollins spat. You don't get to walk away. Malcolm didn't hesitate, he fired first. Crack, the bullet struck Rollins dead center. His eyes went wide with shock as he staggered back. Blood bubbled from his lips. Rollins collapsed, hitting the dirt. His gun slipped from his fingers. He didn't get back up. The battlefield fell silent. The remaining troopers, seeing their leader down and their truck burning, dropped their weapons. The war was over. Malcolm took a deep breath, chest heaving. Briggs clapped him on the shoulder. Damn, man. That was legendary. Hayes holstered her gun. Justice is served. Malcolm turned and rushed back into the lodge. Aisha was still there, holding their baby girl. She looked up at him, relief flooding her eyes. He knelt beside her, pressing a hand to their daughter's tiny head. We made it, he whispered. Aisha smiled weakly. Yeah, we did. Malcolm took a deep breath, looking at the two most precious things in his life. They had survived, and no one would ever take their future from them again. Wow. What a journey. From heartbreak to revenge, from chaos to justice, this was a fight for survival like no other. Malcolm and Aisha's story shows us just how far love and determination can take you, even in the face of corruption and violence. But now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Malcolm's situation? Do you think justice was truly served? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss another powerful story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.